Welcome back to the Ed Show. More town hall crazies, but this time, hey, it's conservatives versus Republicans. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham got ambushed by protesters at a town hall meeting in Greenville, South Carolina on Monday. The protesters were shouting that health care reform and the Federal Reserve are unconstitutional. They accused Senator Graham of compromising. They claimed that, quote, God doesn't compromise, and all U.S. lawmakers take an oath to God when they are sworn in. A good number of them are supporters of former presidential candidate Ron Paul, and they didn't like what Graham had to say to him. Here it is.
I'm not going to leave the Republican Party. I'm going to grow it.
Yeah, right. Ron Paul will grow it. Ron Paul will grow it. Oh, yeah.
Ron Paul's a real conservative.
Ron Paul's the only conservative.
But he said George Bush was a war criminal.
He is. You are too.
Doesn't seem like too much was accomplished there. Joining me now is Congressman Ron Paul to respond to all of this. Congressman Paul, appreciate your time tonight. And I want to know, do you deserve to have a United States Senator say that he doesn't want the Republican Party to be that party of Ron Paul?
Well, I have to admit, I was a little bit surprised that I was on the verge of taking over the Republican Party. That's pretty amazing. But, you know, there are some important issues here because there are some disagreements, just like there are in the Democrat Party. You know, you have the liberals and you have the blue dogs. And there's a disagreement here because modern-day control of the Republican Party has been taken over by the neoconservatives, and they don't have a lot to say about limited government. They talk about more war, more Patriot Act, more unlimited detention without counsel, more spending, TARP funds, bailout funds, and cap and trade. So that's what they're for, but we're for something different. We're for something different.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but I also think that it looks like you are becoming a target of the Republican Party. How do you feel about that?
Well, I look at the positive things because you might argue that case because one senator attacked me in public. But what about the fact that I have every single Republican on the audit bill in the House of Representatives?
Well, we're going to talk about that.
Wait, I have 125 Democrats, too. So I would say that I'm working pretty well with both parties.
Well, Congressman Paul, I'm with you on that. I am with you. We need to audit the Fed. This is a serious issue, and you've got some Democrats over there, and I want to tell our audience tonight that Congressman Grayson, who is the new hero of the progressive movement for all of the aggressive comments that he's been making, he's with you on this, is he not?
That's right.
Okay.
He's worked hard, and he's helped me get those 125 Democrats.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in future shows because I think it's very important to audit the Fed. I think the American people need to know what's happening. But in your situation, it looks like you're being made out to be a target. But I want to talk about these people. You're also being accused of, these are your people that are shouting down this conservative senator, Republican from South Carolina. Is that a fair picture to paint?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I'm sure there are people who are very sympathetic with what I've said, and they believe in limited government, but it sounds like I've instructed them. I have control over them, like the Tea Parties. We had the first major modern-day Tea Party. It was fantastic in the campaign. There's a lot of Tea Parties now, and everybody comes and everybody talks, and I have no responsibility for those. We might have lit a flame a bit and excited people, but for me to be responsible, matter of fact, I don't like the noise sometimes. Matter of fact,
but
have you
asked any of your supporters to back off at all? Have you encouraged them to go out there and shout down senators?
No, I tell them to use the proper decorum, and they know exactly how I feel about it. And I also like to not have it personalized. I've been sort of pushed into saying things about Lindsey Graham because the issue comes up. But even when Bush was president, and I just couldn't stand his foreign policy, I never went after President Bush, and I don't do this with Obama. But I do go after bad policy, interventions, foreign policy, unnecessary war, Patriot Act, all these things. Those are important. Defending the Constitution by both left, right, and progressives would go a long way to solving some of our problems and mellowing this debate out a bit.
Congressman from Texas, Ron Paul. Dr. Paul, thanks for joining us tonight. Got to have you back to talk about that audit of the Fed. I appreciate your time.
Good idea. Thank you.
You bet. For more, let's bring in our panel tonight. Democratic strategist Chris Kofinas is with us tonight, and also Republican strategist John Feary. John, to you first. Why would Lindsey Graham say that? What's the upside of that?
Well, I think what Lindsey Graham was talking about is the people in the crowd that were shouting, we're for Ron Paul, we're for Ron Paul, and interrupting his town hall. The fact of the matter is that Lindsey Graham and Ron Paul probably agree on a lot of things. Ron Paul is actually a libertarian. He wants to get rid of all government. I think that Lindsey Graham has been talking in ways that are very sympathetic to the libertarian movement. Frankly, I'm fairly sympathetic to libertarians. I think that they make a lot of sense on a lot of things. What Ron Paul and Lindsey Graham ought to agree on is when you're having a town hall meeting, you should act with some sense of decorum and not shout out. And I think this is for Republicans and Democrats. I think all across the board, you should be always respectful when you're doing a town hall meeting.
I don't disagree with that, but I find it very interesting that a longtime senator, Republican leader, Lindsey Graham, in his defense mechanism, decided to attack one of his own. Well, and he separates Ron Paul out and makes him the victim in all of this, as if blaming him because, here's Lindsey Graham trying to work with John Kerry on a number of different issues. I think it's a sad moment in America, and I want to look at some of these numbers before we go to Chris. If you look at the Daily Coast Research 2000 poll, overall party favorability, the Democrats aren't bragging. They're at 40%. The GOP's at 22%. You look at Congress, they're not doing any better. Democrats at 38%, and also the GOP at 17%. Chris, may I ask you, is America politically exhausted with all this bickering? What do you think?
Well, I think there is a point where people just become they just kind of tune out. They just hear the bickering back and forth. And I think that's one of the reasons why you tend to see candidates run against Washington. It becomes a very powerful message. I think what is happening within the Republican Party, which I think is, more telling, listen, there's always going to be infighting within parties. You see that within the Democratic Party between the blue dogs and the more progressive wings. But I think what's happening in the Republican Party is much more serious. There is an ideological civil war in the party because they do not know what direction they want to go in, whether they want to go right or even further right. And as a result, you're seeing this break out and radicalize in a lot of different ways.
Okay, Chris, let me ask you, is it jobs or health care? What does the president have to do to set the table for the midterm?
Well, I think it's jobs and the economy are going to be the #1 issue. I think health care is intertwined with that, and I think the president and the White House have made a very strong argument as to why that is the case. But at the end of the day, when people go into that voting booth next year, it is going to be pocketbook issues that are going to rule the day. It always does.
And John Feary, do you play up the 9.8%? Do you go back to calling Obama a failure? How aggressive do the Republicans have to be on this?
Well, I think what Republicans have to do, first of all, they have to, come up with their own plan on trying to deal with unemployment and try to market that plan and try to do the best job they can to get people back to work. I think Chris is right. It's all about the economy. People are really hurting out there. They're hurting in Michigan. They're hurting in Indiana. They're hurting across the country. Unemployment rates 15-20%, and that's not sustainable. We need plans that put people back to work, and I think that Republicans need to help come up with those plans.